Today, I'll be walking you through a Cricut leather bracelet tutorial for this vibrant rainbow heart cuff bracelet. Here's a list of everything you'll need. There are links in the description for supplies and to download bracelet SVG cut files for this project. All right, let's dive in. The first step is to download the bracelet design file. I've got a couple of options for you here. You can buy the one on the left for a few bucks in my Etsy shop, which also helps to support this channel. And there's a 25% off code in the description, and you'll also get these two other designs with it as well. And if you'd rather go the free route, I've linked to some free designs in the description. If you're purchasing the file from my Etsy shop, just follow the link and click Add to Basket, and then proceed to checkout. You'll get an email with a download link and also be able to access it under Purchases and Reviews in your account profile. If you're downloading a free file, follow the link and make sure you filter for free files here on the left, and then find one that you like. I'm going to go with this one here, and then click it, and you'll be taken to the download page. Go ahead and click free download, and the file will be downloaded to your computer as a compressed zip file. Now we're going to open the file in Cricut Design Space. Start by opening Cricut Design Space, and then select New Project to open a new project. Then click Upload in the left panel. Click on Upload Image, and you'll see the drag and drop box. Find the bracelet file that you just downloaded, so I put mine here. So I'm going to unzip it and then open the unzipped folder. In here, you're going to find 5 different formats for each design file. We want the Thorny Heart Bracelet SVG file, which is this one here, and this is the one we're going to be importing into Cricut Design Space. You can go ahead and drag the design file into the drag and drop space here, and then click Continue in the bottom right corner, and then Upload. The file is now in my project. Now I just need to resize it to fit my wrist. If you don't know how to measure wrist size, see the description for a link to a tutorial. Go up to the size section here and enter the wrist size. So mine is 6.5 inches, and then click Enter, and the design is ready to cut. Now it's time to prepare our mat and material for cutting. Because we're working with leather, I'm going to use a strong grip mat so it's nice and secure. I'm also using strong grip transfer tape, which I'm placing here with the sticky side up and then securing using a brayer, and then peeling off the backing to reveal the sticky side. The transfer tape helps keep my mat clean when cutting leather because there are a lot of fibers that can get everywhere and make a huge mess on your mat. This is the piece of leather I've used. You can see it's not too thick, which makes it ideal for the Cricut. This leather is about 0.8 millimeters thick, and I already did some testing and added the custom cut settings to Cricut Design Space. I've linked in the description to a couple of articles about choosing a leather that will work with your Cricut and also how to find cut settings for your leather. So I'm placing it with the fuzzy side up here and making sure it's really secure with a brayer so that it doesn't move during the cut. Now we'll set up the actual cut. Go back into Cricut Design Space and click the Make button in the top right corner. Go ahead and move the design so that it's positioned at the correct place on your mat, and then once that's done, click Continue in the bottom right corner. You'll see this cut options page here. Find and select the custom settings that you've added for your leather. I've included mine on the screen here as a reference. And now we're finally ready to cut our bracelet. So to cut your bracelet, go ahead and load the mat into the Cricut. Move the star wheels to one side so they don't imprint your leather, and then press the flashing Load, Unload Mat button. When the Cricut's ready, press the flashing Go button. This will start the cut, and now we can just let it get to work. I recommend using a deep point blade for these types of leather bracelet projects. Some of the cuts will be too intricate for the knife blade, and the fine point blade won't work well on leather. And make sure it's sharp. A dull blade will ruin the project. When it's done, it's a good idea to check that it cut cleanly before you unload the mat. And here it is. It's finished cutting and time to get it off of our mat. So now we're going to weed the bracelet, which involves getting it off the mat and removing all the little pieces from the cut as well as the transfer tape. I'm using a spatula tool to lift the corner off the mat and then peeling the leather off. You can see that the Cricut cut through the transfer tape. I haven't been able to avoid this, but I do find that using the tape still keeps my mat cleaner than if I don't use it. Okay, so here we have our bracelet, and now I'm removing all the little pieces that are left in the bracelet with a tweezer. This step can be a bit tedious, especially when the designs are very intricate. And here we have our cut bracelet. We've got a really nice clean cut and we're ready to dye it. In this next step, I'm going to dye the bracelet. This is my favorite part. Just a few quick things about dyeing leather before we get into it. First, the topic of dyeing leather could be an entire video on its own, or even several videos, so I'll focus here on a few important things to know for the method I'm using here. One is that you'll want to use a water-based dye for this technique. Oil-based dyes won't work with the foam shaving cream that I'll be using. Next, the leather needs to be unfinished and suitable for dyeing. It's best to check with the vendor that you're buying from that the leather is suitable for water-based dyeing. Also, you need a foam-based shaving cream. Gel-based creams won't work. And it doesn't need to be anything fancy. The shaving cream I use is from the dollar store. If you want more details on this dyeing technique, leave a comment for a future video. So I'm spreading some shaving cream into a shallow tray that's big enough to fit my bracelet and using this spatula here to make it nice and even. Now I'm placing drops of dye onto the foam, alternating the colors. I used 6 different colors, but you can use any color combination you like. I've linked the specific dyes that I used in the description. Now I'm using a knitting needle to swirl the colors together. The idea is to fill in all the white space so that your bracelet will be fully covered in dye. Feel free to experiment with different tools and patterns here. Now I'm carefully placing the bracelet face down into the foam, and I'm trying to make sure that it's in full contact with the shaving cream. It should be sitting lightly on the surface. I'm starting with the front of the bracelet first, but I will be doing the back as well. I typically wait about 5 minutes and then carefully pull the bracelet up out of the foam and transfer it to a plastic surface using a tweezer. Since I'm dyeing both sides of this bracelet, I'm now repeating the same process I did with the front, but this time I can salvage my setup by just filling in any white areas with more dye drops and swirling the colors together again. Then I place the bracelet on the surface again, this time with the back of it in contact with the foam, and let it sit for another 5 minutes. Again, I'm removing the bracelet with a tweezer and placing it on a plastic surface, and then I use a small squeegee to remove as much shaving cream as I can off both sides of the bracelet. Next, I give the bracelet a quick rinse. So just a couple of things about rinsing, which I did off camera. First, make it really quick. We're just trying to get the foam off, but you don't want to lose the dye, which will run. Next, I found that water-based leather dyes won't stain the sink, but you should test it just in case. After you've rinsed it, just dab it with a paper towel lightly and place it on some paper towels to dry. You want to wait at least 24 hours until it's fully dry before the next step. Once the leather is fully dry, we're going to buff and condition it. I'm using a clean rag and buffing the bracelet to remove any excess dye that's sitting on the surface. You don't need to be gentle about this. Apply a good amount of pressure to get the dye off. If you use a lighter colored rag, you'll actually be able to check to see how much rub off you're getting, and when it's almost nothing, that's when you're done. Do this on both sides, and then we're ready for conditioning. To condition the leather, I'm using Neat's Foot oil. This is a local brand, but the one I use now is Phoebing's, which is easier to find. I'm putting some oil on a clean rag, and then since the front is smooth, I can gently wipe it on, and for the back, a dabbing motion is going to work better. The purpose of conditioning is to moisturize our leather, which will have become quite dry and stiff after dyeing and rinsing. Don't overdo the oil. We don't want to completely drench the leather. And then we let it dry for 24 hours. Now I'm going to seal the bracelet. This prevents dye rub-off and keeps the fibers from shedding. The sealant I use is called Phoebing's Leather Sheen. I usually apply a couple of coats to seal and protect the bracelet. So apply some sheen to a rag and then gently wipe the front of the bracelet. For the back, you'll want to dab it with a bit of pressure. Apply an even coat to both sides and then use a narrow paintbrush to apply it along the outer edges. When you're done, let it dry for 8 hours. You can then apply another coat if you want, giving it another 8 hours to dry, and then move on to the next step, which is installing the snap closure. To close the bracelet, I'm going to add a snap fastener. You'll need some snaps and the right installation tools. I've linked to this kit in the description that includes everything you need to install the snaps, except for a hammer or mallet, which you're also going to need. The snaps I use are 12.5 millimeters, and I also like to work on a wooden block to protect my table. The first thing you may need to do is make the holes bigger. This hole punch came with the kit. I positioned it over one of the holes and then gave it a few hits with the hammer for a nice clean cut. And then I repeat this on the other side so that we have 2 holes of the right size for our snaps. Next, I'm going to position the button and socket on one side of the bracelet. So I'm feeding the button up through the hole and resting it on the concave side of this base that came with my kit. I'm placing the socket on top of the button on the other side of the leather and holding everything in place with this pointed installation tool. Next, we secure everything with a few hits of the hammer. And then I check that everything looks good and that there are no gaps and nothing is moving. It is worth practicing this a few times on scraps until you get the hang of it. Now we're going to position the eyelet and stud. I'm inserting the eyelet up through the hole on one side of the leather and placing the stud on top of the eyelet on the other side. I'm flipping over the base to the convex side and aligning with its center. And now I'll secure everything using the hammer. And then check that everything is secure. This time I needed to give it a few more hits with the hammer to get everything securely in place. And once everything looks good, the snaps are done and the bracelet is ready to wear. So here's the finished bracelet. The colors turned out pretty vibrant and the dye technique gave a really cool pattern. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Feel free to like and subscribe to let me know that I should make more. And that's all for now.